The laughter stopped when Jimmy Fallon saw his guest break down during what was supposed to be the silliest segment on The Tonight Show. What started as a playful game of superlatives became the most heartbreaking tribute to a forgotten mother in late-night television history. The cameras kept rolling, but this was no longer about high school awards. It was Tuesday night at Studio 6B in Rockefeller Center, and the audience was buzzing with that midweek energy that made for great television. The Tonight Show crowd was particularly enthusiastic tonight, ready for one of their favorite segments that never failed to deliver laughs. Jimmy moved around the stage in his perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, his infectious energy filling the iconic studio where comedy had lived for generations. Tonight's guest for Superlatives was Rebecca Thompson, a 38-year-old high school principal from Portland, Oregon, who had become famous on social media for her creative ways of making education fun and engaging. Her videos of turning boring announcements into rap songs and organizing flash mob assemblies had earned her millions of followers and recognition as Principal of the Year. She wore a sophisticated burgundy blazer that complemented her warm brown eyes that held the wisdom of someone who had dedicated her life to shaping young minds. During the interview segment, Rebecca had been absolutely delightful, sharing hilarious stories about teenage shenanigans and the creative punishments she'd invented to actually help students learn from their mistakes. Jimmy had been genuinely impressed by her dedication, especially when she talked about personally visiting the homes of students who were struggling academically or emotionally. The audience had been captivated by her passion for education and her genuine love for the kids she served every day. Rebecca had also mentioned, almost in passing, that she'd recently started a program pairing elderly community members with high school students for weekly visits. The kids learn life wisdom from people who've lived it, she'd explained with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and the elderly residents get to feel needed and valued again. The rules of Superlatives were beautifully simple, which made it one of The Tonight Show's most beloved segments. Jimmy and his guest would take turns reading mock high school yearbook superlatives, trying to guess which classmate would have won each ridiculous award. The categories ranged from most likely to become a professional hugger to most likely to marry their high school sweetheart's pet goldfish. Jimmy had been playing this game for years with celebrities, athletes, and everyday heroes, and it never failed to produce moments of pure joy and unexpected revelation. The superlatives were carefully crafted by his writing team to be absurd enough to inspire creative storytelling but relatable enough that everyone could imagine their own high school experience. "All right, Rebecca, welcome to Superlatives," Jimmy announced with his trademark enthusiasm, gesturing toward the oversized yearbook prop between them. "We're going to pretend we went to high school together, and we're voting on the most ridiculous yearbook awards imaginable. The goal is to make each other laugh until we cry." Rebecca laughed genuinely, settling back into The Tonight Show's signature dark gray guest chair. "I have to warn you, Jimmy, I take yearbook superlatives very seriously. I've been signing yearbooks for 20 years, and I've seen some truly creative categories." The audience chuckled appreciatively, already charmed by the educator who had turned discipline into an art form. "That's exactly the kind of competitive spirit I like to see," Jimmy replied with theatrical intensity. "But remember, in Superlatives, there are no rules except that we have to commit completely to whatever ridiculous scenario we create. Let's start with something classic." Jimmy flipped open the oversized prop yearbook to the first page of Superlatives, his eyes scanning the purposefully absurd categories. "Okay, Rebecca, here's our first award. Most likely to become a professional ice cream taste tester. Who from our imaginary graduating class of 2004 would win this prestigious honor?" Rebecca's face lit up with a kind of genuine delight that made for perfect television. "Oh, that's definitely going to Tommy Martinez," she said without hesitation. "That kid would eat ice cream for breakfast if his mother let him. And he actually had sophisticated opinions about flavor profiles. I remember him giving a 20-minute presentation on why mint chocolate chip was superior to cookies and cream." The audience erupted in laughter as Rebecca fully committed to the fictional memory, her storytelling skills as an educator shining through in her detailed character creation. Jimmy was impressed by how quickly she'd embraced the absurdity of the game, while making it feel completely real. "Tommy Martinez, it is," Jimmy declared, making a show of writing the name in the yearbook. "Now it's your turn to give me a superlative. Make it good, Principal Thompson." He closed the book and slid it across to Rebecca with ceremonious gravity. Rebecca opened the yearbook with dramatic flair, scanning the page as if she was searching for the perfect award. "All right, Jimmy, here's yours. Most likely to become a talk show host who makes everyone feel like family. Who wins that one?" Her choice was clearly a playful nod to Jimmy himself, and the audience appreciated the meta humor. "Oh, that's obviously going to be Jennifer Walsh," Jimmy replied instantly, playing along with the fictional classmate game. She was the girl who remembered everyone's birthday, organized study groups for kids who were struggling, and somehow made the lunch ladies laugh every single day. She had this gift for making people feel seen and valued. The game continued for several more rounds, with each superlative becoming more ridiculous and creative. Rebecca proved to be a natural at the improvised storytelling, creating elaborate backstories for fictional classmates with the same care and attention she brought to understanding her real students. Jimmy was having more fun than he'd had in months, delighted by Rebecca's quick wit and genuine warmth. "Okay, Rebecca, here's a really specific one," Jimmy said, flipping to a new page in the prop yearbook. "Most likely to win Mother of the Year every year for the rest of their life. This is someone who just had that natural nurturing instinct, you know? Who gets this one?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and something shifted in Rebecca's expression. Her bright smile faltered slightly, and her eyes took on a distant quality that Jimmy recognized as someone accessing a painful memory. She stared at the yearbook page without really seeing it. "Rebecca," Jimmy's voice was gentle, his comedian instincts immediately recognizing that something had changed in the energy between them. "Everything okay? We can skip this one if you want." The studio audience sensed the shift too, their laughter quieting to concerned attention. Rebecca blinked several times, as if trying to bring herself back to the present moment. When she looked up at Jimmy, her eyes were glistening with unshed tears that she was desperately trying to control. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the microphone clipped to her blazer. "Hey, there's nothing to be sorry about," Jimmy said softly, instinctively moving his chair closer to hers. "Take your time, we're not in any rush here." The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in the studio understood that they were witnessing something more important than entertainment. Rebecca took a shaky breath and looked directly at Jimmy, then at the audience, as if drawing strength from their collective presence. "That award," she said, her voice stronger now but filled with emotion. "The Mother of the Year award. I know exactly who should win it." "Who's that?" Jimmy asked gently, giving her permission to share whatever she needed to say. "My mom," Rebecca said simply, and the two words carried the weight of years of love and loss. "Her name is Patricia Thompson, and she was the most incredible mother anyone could imagine. She made every Halloween costume by hand, attended every school event, turned ordinary Tuesday dinners into celebrations just because we were together." Jimmy nodded encouragingly, understanding that Rebecca needed to tell this story. "She sounds amazing, tell me more about her." His voice had the gentle quality of someone who genuinely cared about the answer. "She taught me everything I know about loving people unconditionally," Rebecca continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about her mother. "When I became a principal, she was my biggest cheerleader. She'd come to every graduation ceremony, every school play, every event where I needed support. She was so proud of the work I was doing with kids." The studio was completely silent now, everyone understanding that this had become something much deeper than a game show segment. Rebecca wiped a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand, but her voice remained steady. "But 2 years ago, Mom was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease," Rebecca said, and the words hit the studio like a physical impact. At first, it was just small things. She'd forget where she put her keys or repeat stories she'd just told. But then it got worse. Jimmy's face showed the deep compassion of someone who understood that some stories needed to be told, regardless of their setting. "How is she now?" he asked quietly, his voice stripped of all performance. "She lives in a memory care facility called Sunrise Gardens," Rebecca said, her voice breaking slightly on the name. "I visit her 3 times a week, every week, without fail. But Jimmy, she doesn't know who I am anymore." The audience made collective sounds of sympathy, quiet gasps and murmurs of recognition from people who had walked similar paths with their own loved ones. Jimmy's eyes filled with tears as he processed the magnitude of what Rebecca was sharing. "Last week, I brought her photo albums from my childhood," Rebecca continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I showed her pictures of herself teaching me to ride a bike, helping me with homework, braiding my hair for picture day. She looked at every single photo like she was seeing strangers." Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that completely defied every television protocol. He reached over and took Rebecca's hand in his, offering the kind of human comfort that transcended any professional boundary. "Rebecca, I can't imagine how hard that must be for you. The worst part is that I see glimpses of her sometimes," Rebecca said, squeezing Jimmy's hand gratefully. "For just a moment, she'll smile in a way that's purely her. Or she'll hum a song she used to sing to me. But then it's gone again, like watching someone slip underwater over and over." Jimmy's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. "But Rebecca, can I tell you something? Everything you are, everything you do for your students, all that love you pour into other people's children, that's your mother living through you. That's her legacy. I started the program pairing teenagers with elderly residents because of her," Rebecca admitted, her tears flowing freely now. "I wanted other families to have those conversations while they still could. I wanted kids to understand that every elderly person was someone's whole world once." The studio audience was visibly moved, with many people wiping away their own tears. This had become something far more powerful than entertainment. It was a testimonial to the enduring power of a mother's love, and the devastating reality of watching that love fade into confusion. "Rebecca, what would you want to say to your mom if she could understand you right now?" Jimmy asked gently, understanding that sometimes television can become a vessel for things that need to be said. Rebecca looked directly into the main camera, as if her mother might somehow be watching and comprehending. "Mom, I want you to know that you were the best mother any daughter could have asked for. Every day I try to love people the way you loved me, completely, unconditionally, fiercely. You taught me that being a good person isn't about being perfect," she continued, her voice strong despite her tears. "It's about showing up every day and choosing to care about others. Every time I help a struggling student or comfort a heartbroken teenager, that's you working through me." Jimmy was crying openly now, understanding that he was witnessing something sacred. "Rebecca, your mother raised someone extraordinary. Even if she can't remember teaching you, the evidence of her love is sitting right here, helping hundreds of kids every year. I would give anything for one more real conversation with her," Rebecca whispered. "One more chance to hear her say my name and mean it. One more moment where she looks at me and sees her daughter instead of a kind stranger who visits regularly." The audience rose to their feet spontaneously, not in the typical TV show applause, but in recognition of something profound and heartbreaking. They were witnessing a daughter's love letter to a mother who could no longer receive it, and everyone understood the magnitude of that loss. Jimmy stood as well and pulled Rebecca into a genuine embrace, the kind that transcends television and becomes purely human. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said into her ear, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "And Rebecca, she still loves you, even if she can't remember why." When they separated, Jimmy looked directly at the camera with an intensity that cut through any pretense of entertainment. "Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes superlatives becomes something bigger than high school awards. Sometimes it becomes about recognizing the real heroes in our lives before it's too late. Rebecca Thompson, I think your mother should win every Mother of the Year award for the rest of time," Jimmy declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute sincerity. "And I think she'd want you to know that the greatest superlative any parent can win is raising a child who makes the world better." The segment that was supposed to last 6 minutes had stretched to nearly 20, and no one in the studio cared about schedules or commercial breaks. This had become something more important than television. It was a reminder about honoring the people who shape us while we still can. The episode aired exactly as it happened, with no editing to soften the emotional impact. Within hours, Mother's Love Forever was trending on social media, with thousands of people sharing their own stories about parents with dementia and Alzheimer's. Sunrise Gardens received hundreds of flowers and cards addressed to Rebecca Thompson from strangers who had been moved by her daughter's love. Most importantly, Rebecca's story inspired a nationwide conversation about supporting families dealing with memory loss diseases. Donations poured in to Alzheimer's research organizations, and memory care facilities reported increased volunteer applications from people who wanted to spend time with residents whose families couldn't visit regularly. 3 months later, Rebecca received a call from Jimmy's production team. A viewer had been so moved by her story that they had funded a new program bringing high school students into memory care facilities across the country, exactly like the one Rebecca had started. It was called Patricia's Program in honor of her mother. Jimmy kept the prop yearbook from that night in his office, not as a memento of a television segment, but as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful awards aren't the ones we give to fictional classmates, but the ones we give to the real people who loved us unconditionally when we needed it most. Subscribe and leave a comment, because some stories need to be remembered forever. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded to call their mother, to visit their grandmother, to have those important conversations while they still can. Because on that Tuesday night in Studio 6B, a high school principal reminded millions of viewers that the greatest superlative any of us can hope for is being loved so completely that the impact lasts long after the memory fades. The game that stopped that night eventually resumed, but it was different. It was deeper, more connected to the truth that sometimes the most important awards aren't written in yearbooks, but carved into the hearts of the people we love. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply being someone's daughter, when they can no longer remember your name, but can still feel your love.